The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily represent those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting group. Access Fort Wayne is a department of the Allen County Public Library. If you or anyone you know might be interested in making a television show, please call 260-421-1250.
Hi, I'm Dr. Rudy Cashman, and welcome to our Mind, Body, Spirit show. I think you'll enjoy this show today. It's about vascular disease. You know, blood vessels supply every cell in our body with oxygen. So it's all over our body, and I'm going to show you today how to prevent, stop, and reverse most vascular disease. So this is a good news show, and you know I'm into wellness. So let's go into history a little bit here. For example, we have probably 1.5 million heart attacks a year in this country. And a good 500,000 of those die. Maybe 500,000 strokes, and about 160,000 die. What I'm saying is 90% of those could have been prevented. I have many references, many books. Read the book of Dr. Katz, K-A-T-Z, the biggest public health official in the world, from Yale University, New Haven, I think. And right on his cover, he says 95% of vascular disease is preventable. 80% of type 2 diabetes is preventable. 50 to 70% of cancer is preventable. Yeah, and you get to listen to that. And this is not at the top of the agenda of most of the medical system, the government, for example. So I have the proof in these many books, which I'll review. Recently, which I knew already, I ran across a book here I'll hold up for you. I encourage you to maybe get a hold of it. You can see him on YouTube. It's by Joseph Kraft, and it says, Diabetes Epidemic and You. Should you be tested? Absolutely not. Only those concerned about their future. He's saying is that you can prevent it most of the time. And what he discovered through autopsies, he was a pathologist, in Chicago, actually, St. Joe Hospital. He autopsied over 3,000 people, and he looked at the bottom line, okay? They don't do many autopsies anymore, just for injuries and things like that. A crime, for example, but they used to autopsy everybody. And that's a big mistake, because the learning curve has gone down because of that. Then he studied 14,438 people, his fellow physicians, and they ran glucose tolerance tests. That's where you fast overnight. First you get a fasting sugar, then a 1 hour, 2 hour, I think he did up to 5 hours, and ran glucose tolerance and serum insulin test. Yeah, on every one of those people, and it's all in this book, and you can see that the first thing that rises in disease and diabetes and vascular disease is the serum insulin. So what are we checking for people in the doctor's office, even children? I checked on that recently. Even children, you know what we're checking? The blood sugar. So we're missing a lot of the diagnosis of people on the path to diabetes, and there's 50 diseases that are associated with it. Yeah, 50 diseases are associated with diabetes. Yeah, from dementia to heart attacks to strokes to thyroid disease to heart attacks, strokes, liver transplants, renal transplants, amputations. I could go on and on. And what he is saying in this book is that the pathology of diabetes is vascular disease. So that's what we want to prevent, type 2 diabetes, and we could avoid most vascular disease. So when you go to the hospital and you had an emergency and maybe they did an angioplasty, which needed to be done because it was an emergency, that afterwards, since maybe you didn't know how to prevent it in the first place because you had the heart attack, how to prevent another one from happening. So to participate in your health care is critical. You've got to read some of these books and you got to follow their advice. What is the pathology of type 2 diabetes? It's vascular disease. I'm reading right out of this book, easy to read. You can get them on YouTube, incidentally. There's Joseph Kraft, YouTube. He's 92 years old, speaking there and being interviewed. He's died since then, a few years later. But even he says, before this is generally known in this country, I'll be looking down on you. I think he's probably watching us today. Okay. So the first changes that occur as the insulin level increases. Remember, insulin takes sugar and puts it in the cell to create energy, ATP. You couldn't live without insulin. But the other thing, insulin does a number of things. But another thing it does, it opens the door to fat in the blood. So fat can enter the cells, and that's why you gain weight. Yeah. Insulin is anabolic. It saves your life because it creates energy, but it also makes you gain weight. When they autopsied children with type 1 diabetes, when they have no insulin, okay, that used to be mainly children years ago, they thought it was due to a virus or bacteria. Actually, I found out since then, children that drink a lot of milk or that are sensitive to gluten, for example, or have celiac disease, are much more likely to also have vascular disease, type 1 diabetes. So the initial pathology is endothelial dysfunction. Dysfunction of, remember, there's 300,000 miles of capillaries throughout your body, okay? It's only one cell layer thick. And about one of the first things that insulin does is punches hole in the endothelium. That's the start of it. You'll see other people speaking about that it's mainly the fat. Actually, it's been proven since that time. Unless it's the VLDL, the very low density LDL, very small particles that are hard and dense, they can bore holes in the vessels too. But that's the main cause of vascular disease. It's the insulin, endothelial dysfunction, okay? That's why before we diagnose people with diabetes, the way we do it today with blood sugars, HbA1cs, glucose tolerance tests, which catches the disease way down the line, when if we pull serum insulin, we catch it early. But when they autopsied type 1 diabetics who never had insulin, they find no vascular disease, proving Dr. Kraft's point. When you start giving them insulin because they need it to stay alive in type 2 diabetes, they develop vascular disease just like the type 2, where you have too much insulin. Isn't that interesting? So to read this book is critical. It's just absolutely critical. And so eye changes, which are the microvessels, precede the diagnosis of diabetes, 7 or 8 years. So does impotency, 7 to 8 years. Actually, one of the first ones is hearing problems, Meniere's disease. Loss of hearing is due to loss of microvasculature, a lot of times from diabetes. That's an early sign of Meniere's disease. Is almost all a vascular disease. The otologists caught onto this very quickly. They accepted this and worked on it. But I've had a problem with the ophthalmologists, the eye doctors, although this has been published, accepted that. I went to two in this town and asked them to lead the fight against diabetes, but they didn't do it. Yeah, I went to them 10 years ago because I knew this already. I had not read Kraft's book. I read Kraft's book recently, confirming. I like confirmation. He's confirming what I already knew. So we have macroangiopathy, okay, big vessels, and microangiography, and this is called atherosclerosis, coronary artery disease, cerebral vascular disease, kidneys, nephropathy, peripheral vascular disease, gestational, when you're pregnant, diabetes, all due to problems with insulin. If we had checked their serum insulin, we had caught them very early. So I encourage you highly to read this book because it's really confirmed what I already was saying. And he also says he studied children from age 3 to 88. I've been telling people that we should start checking people for sugars and the fats in their blood starting at age 1. And I thought I was a radical. Well, he confirms age 3. I like confirmation of information I already knew. So let's continue on the path. So vascular disease is a leading cause of death. Okay? And also, it contributes a great deal to cancers. 50% of the people who die with a heart attack never have the symptoms before that. They just grab their chest and they die. Most people don't know that. Also, angina, which is pain in the chest from vascular disease, is different in women and men. Yes, women can have pain on the right. Men is usually axilla, left shoulder, left jaw, left arm, while in a woman, it can be in the right. So in a woman, say an upset stomach, pain in the axilla, pain in the arm, can be a heart attack. I saw it myself once. A patient came to see me with what looked like a disc problem. MRI showed a little bulging disc, pain in the right arm. Time she get back to her car, she had angina. We took her to the emergency room, confirmed it was heart disease. It wasn't a pinched nerve. So it can be difficult in a woman. Remember I said in a woman the pain can be on the right, not necessarily on the left. So Dr. Furman, Joel Furman, very famous, Dr. Ornish, Dr. Esseltine would say, Colin Campbell, for example, Mark Hyman, would say that vascular disease is reversible, partly reversible, sometimes quickly. Some people have angina and they switch to vegetable type diet, say 70-80%. The angina, their chest pain is gone in days, week or two. It's that quick. And the reason is why. I've given talks, if you listen to them, or you can go to YouTube and put in biome, Rudy Cashman, YouTube biome. That's your gut. Those trillions of bacteria that live in your gut, they affect the metabolism of what you're eating. It will change very quickly. So if you change what you eat, type of food you're eating, cut out sugary drinks, for example, your symptoms can be relieved in days or a week or two. Mm-hmm. Can be quick. It's all of these books, which I'll hold up to you after a while. So let me tell you something about the vasculature in the heart. We get big vessels and little vessels. The big vessels, they ask you to screen you for heart disease. You get a calcium score. That's very popular. Those are big plaques that have calcium in them. They light up. But Dr. Stephen Masley, a book I encourage you to read, Stephen Masley, for example, would say that it is better to get what's called an IMT test, where he uses ultrasound, and he shows you the size and type of plaque as well as just the narrowing. Okay, a plain ultrasound would just give you the narrowing, but he also shows you the size of the plaque. There's a difference in plaque, and he's not that in recommending calcium scores, which everybody recommends, easy to get, but it's CT scan. That's a lot of radiation. You know, some people get run once a year. That's a lot of radiation applied to the body, and that can cause problems. So he does the IMT test on your carotid artery, and personally says that the carotid one is easier to do, costs less, and safer. That's his opinion. I'm not giving my opinion. I don't know. He says, as a matter of fact, he's never found a abnormal, a negative test in the neck, and you have severe heart disease. He says that in his book. You know, who knows? I don't know if that's true or not, but he says that, and he's written this excellent book. The big plaques are not the one that generally rupture. What generally ruptures is the little plaques in your arteries that don't have calcium in them. They don't show up, but they can have in them a very soft covering that easily ruptures, and then white blood cells attack you to try to heal you, and then clot forms because of a little bit of bleeding, and your heart attack, and you maybe survive it, and maybe you won't. So it's the vulnerable plaque are the ones that you don't see on the calcium score. So he says, why get the calcium score? He's got a point. I'm not saying that's what you should do, but I want you to have an open mind and maybe do some reading about it and discuss it with your physicians, for example. So let's move on here. What kind of tests can you get? Ultrasound tests can be done. The IMT, which I spoke about, Dr. Massey, what he recommends. You can do a treadmill test that tests your VO2 max, your maximum oxygen utilization, which is very popular. An angiogram shows you the vessels, for example, and a Doppler ultrasound tests are used. Isotopes are used, CT scans with calcium scores, and your tolerance of exercise is called a 3-step test. You can do it at the Y, you can do it in some offices, and determine. Some people would say how quickly your pulse returns to normal after exercise is the best test. You know, that's in quite a few of those books. So there's a point to that. If you eat, I just attended the Lifestyle Conference, and one of the Esseltine daughters, Jane, was there giving a talk on eating mainly vegetables, for example, as a way to prevent, reverse vascular disease. But things that lead to less vascular disease are normal blood pressure. Blood pressure is very extremely important to measure that regularly, and especially if vascular disease, to do it maybe a few times a day. They'll speak about in your blood, your LDL, but the science is slowly advancing in the LDL business, is that they're now finding that actually the different sizes in the LDL. The big one is big and fluffy and just bounces through the arteries like a volleyball, and really has very little to do with major vascular disease. It's the very low density LDL, the particle size, the particle density, that little BB, that is so hard that if it bounces around your 300,000 miles of vasculature, it makes holes in the intima and causes inflammation and vascular disease. That's part of it. But the insulin, Dr. Kraft, who confirmed it at autopsies, would be bigger, but both are involved here. And the LDL-A is even worse of them and can be checked for. through normal testing. Type 2 diabetes causes a great deal of vascular disease because, as we spoke from Dr. Kraft, is that the insulin is anabolic, makes you gain weight, helps form diabetes, makes the arteries stiff, increased rates of cancer, increased rates of vascular disease, increased rates of arthritis, increased rates of lupus, for example, by the type of proteins that are produced. So to get rid of type 2 diabetes is extremely important. You can get rid of it 6 weeks, 90% of the time. I give talks on that. My Monday show on public access talks about diabetes all the time. I'm going to even film another show today. And the changes can be quick because your biome, your trillion of bacteria that are alive in your gut today, the lifespan of one bacteria is 20 minutes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The mucosa that covers your gut, that determines the rate that things get absorbed and pass into your bloodstream, they change every 24 hours. So what you eat, what you consume, what you're drinking can change your biome very quickly. That's why Mark Hyman says you can get rid of type 2 diabetes. You watch out, the blood sugars will dive if you're eating the correct food. Maybe in a week you need to get off all medications. Check with your doctor. But that's scientific. That's been proven. Okay? So stenting and heart surgery are important, but we spoke about prevention. A normal weight, exercise regularly. Stress plays a big part. Stress, because the heart has attached to it regular nerves, splenic nerves, okay, and an autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic, the stressor, and the parasympathetic, the relaxer. They attach to the heart. And the autonomic works very quickly. So a person has a great deal of stress, like the wife dies, the husband dies, or a kid dies, somebody's in an accident, can kill you. Bang, like that, because the effects of the autonomic nervous system is instantaneous. So to exercise regularly, to practice stress reduction techniques, which can be yoga, deep breathing. A big one is to live in the moment of the day. If I have a stressful day, I try to live in the moment. I don't think of the past. I don't think of the future. I toss it over the shoulder. I do some deep breathing, in and out. My blood pressure drops. I feel better. And what is extremely stressful comes down. And because sudden heart attacks it's to the point that in ancient times, that a voodoo doctor in the ancient tribes could point his finger at you, and when that happened, tribesmen would realize that they had been thrown out of the tribe. That was so stressful to that person that a lot of times they died instantaneously. Mm-hmm. The blood pressure rose, the heart rates increased, they developed heart and pulmonary dysfunction, and he just fell over dead. That's been well written about and described in the medical literature. So stress, I can't overestimate how stress is important. So if you get diabetes and advanced vascular disease, maybe a heart attack, lack of exercise, lack of stress control, a setup for trouble. You have to work on that, okay? I encourage people to participate in their health care. But some don't like to read, don't want to participate. So I tell you, so to eat the right food is the most important thing, okay? So Dr. Joel Fuhrman, very famous. That's one of the books I have his here, The End of Heart Disease, Dr. Joel Fuhrman, okay? I really like his information. It's accurate, he's sincere, I know him. And but last time we met in Fort Wayne, I beat him in tennis. He told me that was the only reason he was here. No, he gave a lecture. But the thing about tennis, I think he meant it. But his way of eating, but he wrote a cookbook called Quick Fix. I don't own any part of the book, and so I have nothing financially involved here. If you want to do any reading, his every meal has a picture and the recipe, lunch, dinner, breakfast, smoothies, 20 pages of explanation. You did that for 6 weeks, you'd probably be rid of most of your vascular disease, and your diabetes would be gone 90% of the time. I've had many patients do it. Incidentally, his book on diabetes, which I'll have on the next show, on the back, I got my name on there because I read it for him. I think he respected my knowledge. I had no financial relationship, but I think he sold over 2 million copies. So what does this speak for? Maybe a little credibility, okay? And I just want you to know where the information is coming from. But, you know, if you have unstable angina, the cardiologist and the association will have certain criteria where you need immediate angioplasty. Unstable angina, they may need an angioplasty. But participate in your healthcare. Do some reading. If you have time, you come with an acute heart attack in the emergency room and they want to do an angioplasty, I suggest you have it done. Although there have been a lot of patients where surgery was recommended and they just didn't want it. And they went on a nutrient way of eating and they survived, okay? But that's a risk you want to assume. And I just want you to know, actually, that has happened. And the odds of that happening to you, who knows, okay? And so stenting and surgery definitely have a place, but they don't correct the disease. If they do a bypass surgery, they're bypassing the problem. But you still got the problem. You still got the problem. So when you leave the hospital, maybe you ought to do some reading, some research, and study about stress and the exercise that you might tolerate, for example. High-intensity intermittent training may be of value, but you got to check with your cardiologist. You know, where you maybe walk a little faster, walk a little slower, walk a little faster. You're training your heart. It does have some value, but it has to be cleared by your doctor. And so why do these things occur in America? Partly we're eating processed food 50% of the time. 5% of the time we're eating meat. We're eating maybe only 11% vegetables. When meat has in it a lot of cholesterol, a lot of bad fat, not good fats, bad fats. And they have shown that meat eaters have higher rates of heart disease, okay? Dr. Esselstyn would say that, Dr. Furman would say that. I didn't say zero meat, so to eat a little bit of turkey, a little bit of chicken. Remember, chicken, though, is 40% fat. Dr. Furman would say that's okay. Dr. Esselstyn would say no meat, okay, because he studied it in a number of the sickest people at the Cleveland Clinic, and most of them survived. So all these ways of Esselstyn, Furman, Pritikin, Mark-Hyman, they're all a little bit different, but the general principle generally are quite similar. For example, so there was a large Predimed study of the Mediterranean diet, and they, because you hear a lot about that, but that has not been critically studied actually, and but they found that illness is dose related. Are you eating 100% nutrient dense vitamins, minerals, full of nutrient dense food? Is it 90%, 10%, 20%? Even a bad way of eating is about probably 50% vegetables. So it's dose related, really. So what does nutrient dense mean? Foods of color, for example. Beans, fruit, vegetables, seeds, whole grains. But remember whole grains to also get a gluten test. When I attended an Esselstyn lecture last weekend, Jane Esselstyn, she never brought up gluten. Well, gluten can increase vascular disease, for example, and you can have sensitivity to it, all type of autoimmune diseases you can get. So I think gluten testing is important. We should do it in children. In this country, we check gluten for people, 5% of them. In Australia, 90% of them. I think that's a mistake. Also, you need to learn the science of milk. You can go to YouTube, Cashman, and pull up milk. And because I read Joe Keon's book, Joe Keon, Whitewash. I read that, 1,000 references is in there. Milk is not a health food. There's no mammal drinks the milk of another mammal except us. Yeah, that's true. We don't. The casein is very carcinogenic. We're not used to the sugars in milk. We don't have the lactose enzyme to digest it. As a matter of fact, it leaves us about age 4 because nature designed it. We don't need milk after age 4. So you need to look into that. And Dr. Furman will call his diet nutritarian, way of eating, nutrient dense. I didn't say you had to be a vegan or a vegetarian. Flexitarian is another way. You're flexible. I mean, you might eat a little bit of meat, but as long as you're 70, 80% nutrient vegetable type food, you're going to be very healthy. You want food full of vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals, and you want the rainbow, the mosaic of interaction of these foods to run the metabolism of your body. Okay? Stephen Masley, in his book, will bring up about 5 factors that lead to vascular disease. Risk factor number 1, he calls metabolic syndrome high blood sugar. But remember, that's insulin, isn't it? If you get high blood sugar, your insulin level is up. Okay? And the metabolic syndrome would be a waist measurement would be critical. Waist measurement, frankly, is better than a blood test. You get a pot belly, you're a diabetic unless you prove it to me with a blood test. There are a few overweight people who exercise a lot who don't have diabetes. But Joseph Kraft would say if a person with a heart attack came to the emergency room and you say, you have diabetes, and they say no, he would say, you're just wrong. Okay. You got to prove it to him. So that would be important. So waist measurement, low HDL, that's a heavenly cholesterol, the one, the garbage collector that cleans out your arteries. That could be too low. Your very low density LDL, you should have checked. Triglycerides are very important. Sugar gets converted to triglycerides. That makes these receptors on your vessel sticky. That's why you have insulin resistance. Every cell has these receptors on them, and insulin cannot get sugar into the cell because you have insulin resistance, full of triglycerides. So to check your triglyceride level is important. You like it to be under 100 at least. So if you have 2 or 3 of these factors, expanding waistline, high fasting blood sugar, that would be over 100, triglycerides over 150, high blood pressure, that's greater than 140, over 85 or so, low HDL, the heavenly cholesterol, and a CRP, which measures inflammation in your body. You get two of these, you probably have metabolic syndrome. That's a path to vascular disease, to catch it early. But remember what I said, if you were to pull serum insulins and get a glucose tolerance and an insulin assay test years before, you would catch your way on the path and can prevent all this disease. Dr. Kraft is right. Joseph Kraft is correct. So screening is important. We used to think the CDC or NIH, they were recommending you start getting tested at age 40, 45. No. start getting tested as a child. The American Pediatric Association still only gets blood sugars and HbA1cs as this. I checked on it. I called to Iowa. I spoke with the head of the Pediatric Society in the city for the state. For the state, that's how they test children. Children need insulin tolerance tests at a young age, and then we be catching them on the path to all this disease, and we probably would be emptying our hospitals. Mm-hmm. Amputations of the legs probably would stop. I don't know why anyone is doing it, but I'm pushy about it because it's prevention. I am a doctor, so you can also get an ideal advanced lipid profile. That's something new, okay? So effective HDL2. Remember the HDL, the heavily cholesterol? The type 2, you like a high number in that. There's actually a type 3, which is not good. You want the big fluffy LDL cholesterol, the one that bounces through your arteries like a volleyball, okay? And you want a normal LPA, which is a bad cholesterol. That's detailed fat testing. And so another risk factor is being overweight and obesity. But there are some people that are normal weight, 25%, who have abnormal blood tests. They get fat on the liver. They get fat on the omentum that covers your guts. They get fat on every organ but get skinny. So as far as I'm concerned, you are what your blood tests are, not just your body size. Just keep that in mind, okay? So you need blood testing. Personally, I think we all should be tested starting age 3. Put it in a book or computer chip. Keep it for a lifetime. It's what they do in France. So when you walk in the doctor's office in France, it's called Carte Vitale. They put it in a machine, and your lifetime history of health is right there. The World Health Organization called them the most advanced healthcare system in the world. Are you surprised? With our great computer systems, we could do it too. It's just medicine, the government, insurance companies, lobbying people. They don't want you to do that because they make money the other way. I'm promoting a change, and I'm working with many organizations to see if they would lead the change. I spoke to head of one hospital recently. I spoke to Rotary. I get Purdue University who are running some marketing forums. They want to work with me. So somebody, I think, will pick up the mantra that we test people very early. We will prevent most disease. We will stop it, and we will reverse it. Isn't that a great opportunity? I'm happy every day. And I have many patients that walk up to me and say, my diabetes is gone. Matter of fact, today I saw a school teacher who had attended my lectures on milk. She had stopped milk, and she was feeling so much better, so happy, smiling, because she had stopped drinking milk every day and stopped recommending it to children every day. Mm-hmm. So that was very interesting. Some people think, Masterly writes here, aerobic fitness is the best measure of looking at the future. Interesting. Yeah, and we don't need just 30 minutes of exercise, which you speak about. You got to make it significant exercise. Just walking slightly bigger, okayed by your doctor. But women, it's even more risky. Their vessels by nature are a little bit smaller. For them, it's 60 minutes, 5 days a week. Okay? So I think this is important. You want to measure your risk. Let's measure your risk. Go over these factors. Again, out of Bill Mousley's book here. Your LDL cholesterol should be under 100, and your healthy HDL cholesterol should be at least for men should be over 40, women over 50. Do you have an advanced cholesterol profile? Remember, we talked about this small LDL, the particle size and their density. Is your fasting blood sugar elevated? What about the glucose tolerance test and the insulin tolerance test? What about your waistline? Are you overweight? What about your CRP level? Are you smoking tobacco? Excuse me. Drinking too much alcohol, which can affect vascular disease. And are you eating a nutritarian way of eating? How much trans fats are the bad fats? Otherwise, fats as themselves are not that unhealthy. Here's another book I'd like to show you. And this is very interesting. You've heard about him, Gary Taubes. The Case Against Sugar is a book which I read recently, but this is another one of his books, The Diet Delusion, Gary Taubes, okay? He's very famous. Matter of fact, in his book on The Case Against Sugar, I encourage you to read it, because sugar is the booger and the hooker. That's the bad guy. It's not the fats. This is before it's trans fats which are bad, where they add hydrogen to oils, make trans fats. They're the ones that lower your good cholesterol and up your bad cholesterol, okay? So trans fats are bad, but the rest of the fat isn't bad. He writes this big book. I read the darn thing. Then he has 10 things in his epilogue which summarize things, and I'd like to read some to you. It's fascinating. Dietary fat, okay, whether saturated or not, we didn't say trans fat, we said saturated, okay, is not a cause of obesity, heart disease, or any other chronic disease of civilization. It's not the fat, it's the sugar. So what Esselstyn in his talks here, I hardly had the word sugar mentioned. Matter of fact, they did recommend whole grains. Whole grains have amylopectin A in it, a sugar that's higher on the glycemic index than regular sugar. Yeah. Okay? So to do a little bit of keto, for example, if you do a lot of keto, you're probably going to gain weight. A little bit of keto, fat metabolism, might be good for you. The problem is the carbohydrates in the diet. Their effect on insulin secretion. Where did we hear that before today? Okay? And thus the hormonal regulation of homeostasis, the entire harmonic ensemble of your body, which is 50 hormones, okay? And so the more easily digestible and refined carbohydrates, they have greater effect on our health, weight, and well-being, not the fat. Sugars, sucrose and high fructose corn syrup specifically, are particularly harmful, probably because the combination of fructose and glucose simultaneously elevates insulin while overloading the liver with carbohydrates. You see, when you eat sugar, which is half glucose and fructose, 50-50, the glucose elevates the insulin. The fructose goes straight to the liver, makes fatty liver, which results in disease. So the direct effect on insulin, blood sugar, refined carbohydrates, starches, and sugars are the dietary cause of coronary heart disease and diabetes. Sugar, the booger, and the hooker, okay? And obesity is a disorder of excess fat accumulation, not overeating and not sedentary behavior. It's the metabolism, okay? Consuming excess calories does not cause us to grow fatter any more than it causes a child to grow taller. Expanding more energy than we consume does not lead to long-term weight loss. It leads to hunger. And the point they're making, which I've studied a little bit, exercise is important. It's good for your mind. I do a lot of it, from pickleball to tennis to tap dancing. Okay, so whatever you enjoy doing, you know what happens when you exercise, and it's happened to me. You just eat more. Exercise is important for the mind, and in these other books, the amount of exercise you do determines your health, but actually you're eating better when you do that. The amount of calories you burn, you just get back by eating more after you exercise. Interesting. I didn't say you necessarily had to accept that, but that's in many of these books here, okay? And insulin is the primary regulator of fat storage. Remember I said it's anabolic? It causes you to gain weight. So when insulin levels are elevated, either chronically, long-term, or after a meal, we accumulate fat in our fat tissue. Remember, insulin drives the sugar into the cell, okay, to make energy, but it opens the door to the cell to let fat in, and the fat cells get bigger, and you get bigger. So insulin is your enemy. So by stimulating insulin secretion, carbohydrates make us fat and ultimately cause obesity. Remember, it opens the door to obesity. And the fewer carbohydrates we consume, the leaner we will be, and the healthier we will be. And by driving fat accumulation, carbohydrates also increase hunger and decrease the amount of energy we expend in metabolism and physical activity. I think this is a wonderful summary, and I encourage you to read some of Gary Taubes' work, especially The Case Against Sugar by Gary Taubes. He has a chapter in there. You won't believe this one. I'd rather speak to anyone that knows this one. Let's get it lighter. There's sugar in cigarettes. Yeah, you can YouTube, just Google it. Sugar in cigarettes. The information will come up. It was in the paper recently. I've known that for years. Yeah. And the reason it's in there, it increases the addiction rate. Mm-hmm. In 1910, they could only addict so many people to cigarettes because the smoke is alkaline. You start coughing. That's the reason I don't smoke. In high school, I tried it one day. Me and my roommate, we coughed the whole night through, and we never took it up again, okay? Because it's alkaline. If you add sugar to a cigarette, it becomes acidic, opens the alveoli up, lets the chemicals, the sugar and the nicotine get into the blood system, and the addiction rate doubles. And the reason this happened, the Burley tobacco in Kentucky, which they dried for a week, has holes in the leaves, while the Virginia tobacco doesn't have them. And then after they're dried, they put them in honey and molasses. And that leaf comes out 40% sugar. Mm-hmm. True story. Rarely meet anybody that knows that. So you can Google that. I'll read a whole chapter on it in Gary Taubes' book, The Case Against Sugar, which explains it very well, or Google it. So you can imagine when we're juuling or now or using e-cigarettes, what they're doing to the kids. And the latest reports actually indicate maybe what's the addictive and toxic substance is not the nicotine, it's the sugar. I saw that. They're starting to discover that. But a year from now, it's going to be very different. And we spoke, so Dr. Furman is talking about nutrient-dense food, and he even scored them. He has what are called ANDI scores, A-N-D-I. You can look it up in one of his books or online. So the nutrient density of the food, which is better for you, like kale would get 1,000 points, white sugar might get 10 points, okay? So it's a nutrient density that determines your health. Remember, I don't recommend dairy, and if you need to confirm that, read Whitewash by Joe Keon. And Dr. Furman's book, on page 27 of his book, he has the features of the nutrient-dense way of eating, which I truly believe in. Doesn't have to be 100%, 80%. Foods of color, some exercise, stress reduction, and you'll be healthy. Some of the foods you can measure on the glycemic index. For example, actually grapes, because of fiber, are only 14, while white rice is an 80-something, yeah. Rice is a sugar, even brown rice. One may be 82, the other one's 78. So rice is a sugar. White bread is a sugar. So in the sugar, so what you're trying to do is travel in a certain range of blood sugar rise, and you'll be healthy. What you don't want is what you're eating, and it's a huge spike, a lot of insulin secreted, then it drops, goes below 100, maybe down to 60, you're hungry, and you eat again. You see what I mean? So to avoid sugar addiction is to eat nutrient-dense food, foods of fiber. Fiber is your friend. So when eating vegetables, they have a lot of fiber, full of complex sugars. Stalks, for example, the body can't break it down and just passes right through your gut. Remember, your gut can be your friend or your enemy, and leaves in the stool. Yeah. So you can eat a lot of vegetables, say 1,000 grams of vegetables, but you won't absorb them all, maybe 70%. Okay? So it depends how much fiber is present. So it's not calories in, calories out, which for years they thought, well, it depends how many calories you eat, determines how much weight you gain. No, it's the type of food, because the foods with a lot of fiber don't get all absorbed, okay? So the Framingham Heart Study indicated thousands of people they studied in Framingham, a city in Massachusetts. The ones who had a cholesterol less than 150, they had very, very few, if any, heart attacks at all. And the very low density LDL, less than 80, had very few heart attacks. But the whiter the bread, the sooner you're dead, okay? Don't eat anything with a mother or a face, Dr. Esselstyn says, okay? Now, Dr. Furman say it's okay to eat nuts, and Dr. Esselstyn say don't eat nuts. These are minor differences in types of way of eating. I think Furman is right, because nuts have in them high fiber. They have in them good carbohydrates, quite a few vitamins. But if you're allergic to them, don't eat them. I found, I don't think I'm allergic, but they seemed to, I had a Brazilian nut one time, gave me a kidney stone. You don't want nothing to do with that, okay? But now what I put in my coffee is pea milk. Yeah, I don't drink a glass of milk, but I use pea milk. Got no problems with that. A lot of protein in there, for example. So fiber is your friend, okay? So the carbohydrates depends on the quality, and maybe you need a gluten test too, because you can eat nutrient-dense breads, for example, Ezekiel bread, which I eat periodically, but it does have gluten in it, so you got to be careful. So animal protein also has in it, the reason we don't recommend that, it has insulin growth factor in it, which causes cancers and dementia. So that's the reason that we want to avoid that. And it also increases heart disease, can lead to congestive heart failure. And our heart, incidentally, pumps about 3,000 gallons of blood a day, okay? Lots of oxygen too. So we talk about angina, ischemia, but a lot of chest pain is due to stress. Actually, 75% of chest pain is stress. But then again, you don't want to say it's stress and was a heart attack, so it can be difficult. But it's something to keep in mind too. But again, it's the unstable plaque, the one that has little calcium in it, but a thin covering, almost like a spider web, very thin covering. That's a dangerous one because it can break easily. It depends on the amount of fat that's below it. So it's not the calcified that's necessarily the problem, okay? But your diet will stabilize these plaques, and it can be very quickly. But some people need angioplasty and heart surgery, and I'm not against that. But what I'm against is that that we don't try to prevent diabetes. We don't diagnose type 2 diabetes early. So that's how you avoid vascular disease. Let's get a serum insulin, even in children. And then we'd catch you way before the path of vascular disease. And I think our hospitals, they have hearts in the front of them. I'd rather see vegetables in front of them because you'd be healthier. And in terms of procedures for vascular disease, their death rate from vascular disease has not been decreasing anymore very much because they've saved some lives, no question. They saved some lives with angioplasties and surgeries, but we don't seem to advance that much further. How can you advance it further quickly? Proper eating. So prevention may be the path. Personally, I think that is a path and should have been the path to begin with, along with the advancement in procedures. I'm not against them, but they should travel together. They should travel together. So what are characteristics of vulnerable plaque where the lipid part, the fat part is big, where it's infiltrated with inflammatory cells, and the fibrous cap that keeps it in place is very thin. Remember, the IMT test is the one that detects that. So, in summary, what I'm really saying is prevention by testing serum insulins, even in children. Put it in a computer chip, keep track of it in a log. Tell the children, if a child is overweight, assume it's diabetic. May not be so, but test it properly. Don't just get an HbA1c or fasting blood sugar. It's not enough. Get a serum insulin. Then you say, it's elevated. Okay, your child is on the way to diabetes and early vascular disease, maybe a heart attack in the 30s and 40s. Yeah, when they checked the deaths from war in Vietnam and Korea, the Americans were full of vascular disease. Well, the Vietnamese and Koreans themselves were not. Okay, so we know from pathological studies that this is present. And remember, some of these procedures that they do are not without complications. You can have an angioplasty and there can be bleeding, infections, and a lot of time emboli get thrown to the brain, cardiac bypass surgery. About 40% of the people who went through a bypass surgery, remember you're bypassing the problem, hooking up a bypass vessel, 40% of them had emboli to the brain, affecting their memory and their dementia. And remember, dementia is related a great deal to type 2 diabetes because of insulin. That's actually the reason. 40% of Alzheimer's disease, maybe actually 67% of Alzheimer's disease is related to diabetes. It's not just an isolated disease. Most people don't know that. Attend my lectures or go Alzheimer's disease, YouTube, Rudy Cashman, the TV shows will pop up. You become a lot more educated about it. The good news is that heart disease, vascular disease, is preventable. A great deal of it, 90% of it, can be stoppable and can be partly reversible. Dean Ornish wrote about it. Dr. Esselstyn wrote about it. Dr. Furman wrote about it. I talk about it. Gary Taubes talk about it. Joe Kraft really points out the pathology of it. Stephen Masley has a 30-day heart tune-up, also a good book to read. So gather information. That's really the answer to this. I think the biggest thing, though, I think, is to prevent, stop, reverse diabetes. It would be the best thing that you could do. You can look at my YouTube shows, Rudy Cashman, put in the specific subject, diabetes, vascular disease, and 4 or 5 shows will show up. If you put in, all the shows show up, but you can be specific. I tested it the other day. You can say gluten, and bang, 5 shows up. So that's information you can get for free. Well, why am I doing this? Because I love you. I care about you. I'm a doctor. To me, this is very interesting. But you must participate in your health care. It can't just be, here's your pill. Okay, the pill may save you, but I want you to do more than that, if you can. And if you see me at Starbucks getting a cup of coffee, give me a hug and ask me questions, or see me at the Three Rivers Pharmacy for free every Friday, like I already did today, which has been a lot of fun for me, and I've helped a lot of people, and will continue to do so. And we'll see you next time. Namaste. Thank you very much.